In July of 1943, shortly before the Normandy invasion, the Allied Unified Command faced a significant challenge during the campaign in Sicily. Personal rivalries, rushed strategies, and inexperienced military units would soon lead the Allies to discover harsh and expensive lessons that would be pivotal for their invasion of Europe. Earlier in 1943, Allied forces comprising Anglo-American troops achieved a decisive victory against Italo-German forces in Tunisia, capturing a staggering 250,000 enemy personnel. In the spring of that year, after extensive discussions, the combined chiefs of staff solidified plans to launch an operation in Sicily as the forthcoming phase leading to an assault on Italy, considered the so-called soft underbelly of Europe. The Allies believed that by seizing Sicily, they could secure greater mobility for their forces across the Mediterranean and extend the reach of bomber fleets into further occupied territories of Europe. This move might also pacify Stalin by creating another front in Europe, just as German forces were poised to commence their summer offensive at Kursk. There was a sliver of hope that the invasion of Sicily could compel Italy to exit the conflict, although this perception leaned more toward aspiration than reality. Allied intelligence successfully instilled uncertainty among Axis forces regarding the true location of the impending invasion thanks to Operation Mincemeat. Allied agents planted deceptive invasion plans aimed at Greece on the corpse of a fictitious Royal Marines officer, dropped off the coast of Spain. This misinformation prompted the Germans to reposition several divisions to Greece. Furthermore, Allied air raids targeted Sardinia, adding confusion regarding the actual invasion site. British Field Marshal Harold Alexander oversaw the operation named Operation Husky, utilizing a specially formed 15th Army Group, which included the British 8th and the U.S. 7th Armies. The initial assault force comprised approximately 160,000 soldiers, alongside 600 tanks and 1,800 artillery pieces. They benefited from around 4,000 Allied aircraft from the Mediterranean Air Command, operating from North Africa and Malta. The primary aim of the airmen was to establish air superiority, disrupt the island, and provide close air support. This coalition would confront General Alfredo Guzzoni's 6th Italian Army, which had 10 divisions, though 6 of these units were primarily static coastal defensive formations. His overall strength encompassed around 200,000 combatants alongside 260 tanks and armored vehicles, supported by as many as 30,000 German troops from the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and the elite Hermann Göring Division. Despite the German presence being under-equipped and comprising many replacement soldiers after severe conflicts on the Eastern Front, they still had the capacity to deploy around 100 Panzer III and IV tanks, along with 17 Tiger tanks. In the air, the Axis had access to about 1,600 aircraft from various bases located on Sicily, Sardinia, and mainland Italy. However, the Italian forces were hindered by poor equipment. The Livorno and Napoli divisions were considered among the best in the Italian army, but were primarily equipped with outdated early war tanks or commandeered French vehicles. The available vehicles were organized into mobile units, with the most formidable being Battle Group Schmaltz, which was tasked with countering the advancing forces near Syracuse, Augusta, and Catania. While officially under Italian command, German troops generally operated with considerable independence. Both Allied commanders on the ground, Bernard Montgomery and George Patton, were notably critical of the strategy during its planning stages. They insisted on deploying their seasoned troops from North Africa, but Alexander encouraged the use of newer units to provide them with essential experience. The threat posed by enemy air power was also a significant concern for the landing forces. Consequently, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder proposed the takeover of well-established enemy airfields in the southeastern region of Sicily, allowing fighter units to operate directly from Sicily rather than relying on Malta. Montgomery and Patton also sought additional close air support during the landings, but Tedder contended that focusing on achieving air superiority through bombings of enemy airfields would be a more efficient utilization of Allied aerial strengths. Beginning in early June, Allied planners meticulously prepared for the invasion. By June 11th, the Allied Navy and Air Force heavily bombarded the nearby fortress islands of Pantelleria and Lampedusa, coercing their submission. On July 2nd, D-Day -7, Sicily and various targets in southern Italy faced intense aerial and naval bombardments aimed at disrupting supply lines, airfields, and defenses. Consequently, Axis forces relocated the bulk of their aircraft to mainland Italy, leaving approximately 125 planes on Sicily. By this point, the Mediterranean Air Command had gained air superiority in the region, although the German Luftwaffe still had reserves of bombers and fighters that potentially interfere with the landing. Meanwhile, British and American paratroopers finalized preparations for their deployment. Both British and American strategists created the airborne segment of Husky on short notice, and there were concerns surrounding the planned nighttime drop on July 9th. U.S. 82nd Airborne Commander Major General Matthew Ridgway expressed apprehensions about friendly fire incidents and the limited night flying proficiency among American pilots. Ultimately, 5,300 airborne troops were slated to drop into Sicily, where U.S. units primarily used C-47s for their jumps, while British paratroopers utilized gliders. However, there was a shortage of trained glider pilots, and C-47 crew members were inexperienced at towing gliders. Upon landing, the paratroopers were to secure crucial crossroad junctions and bridges to hinder or halt Axis counterattacks against the landing areas. The 82nd Airborne planned to seize high ground around the junction at Piano Lupo, while the British 1st Air Landing Brigade aimed to capture the significant Ponte Grande Bridge near Syracuse. Unfortunately, the initial aerial activities took a wrong turn as planes towing gliders quickly lost formation and direction. The situation worsened when confronted with anti-aircraft fire. Tug pilots maneuvered erratically, leading some to release their gliders prematurely. Of the 144 gliders launched, a mere 54 reached Sicily, with only 6 landing on target, while an estimated 69 may have crashed into the sea, likely resulting in around 300 paratrooper fatalities. This predicament left roughly 100 troops available to carry out their objectives. American drops fared no better, as pilots again lost their way due to darkness and strong winds buffeted the landing zones. Most paratroopers descended in small clusters, with fewer than 200 able to immediately seize the Piano Lupo junction. Frequently, troops landed and sought direction based on the sounds of combat. Yet, despite their small numbers, Anglo-American forces began attacks on many of their initial targets. A solitary glider team successfully captured the Ponte Grande Bridge, while U.S. paratroopers engaged the defenders at Piano Lupo. U.S. paratrooper Bob Fielder recollected his approach towards Piazza Ridge. He was startled by a loud, rapid-fire German machine gun, unfamiliar with the sound of 1,200 rounds per minute, wondering what it could be. At Ponte Grande, Italian troops wielding mortars and armored vehicles assaulted the British paratroopers, diminishing their ranks to just 70. Relieved as seaborne forces gave them support, the demoralizing drops had a strategic benefit. The scattered landings created the illusion of a larger invasion and kept Axis forces occupied with guerrilla-like skirmishes. Although Guzzoni announced an invasion, Axis command put forth no substantial countermeasures against the land forces. Concurrent with the nocturnal parachute drops were coastal commando raids conducted by No. 3 Commando and SAS teams, tasked to neutralize coastal artillery positions. At around 3 a.m. on July 10th, the initial seaborne troops arrived at the Piceno Peninsula. Royal Marines, along with the 1st Canadian and 51st Highland Divisions, landed under the cover of darkness, discovering that many Italian positions had already been abandoned. Coastal defenders had largely fled. The British 50th and 5th Divisions landed to similar minimal resistance. By 5 a.m., British and Canadian forces had secured the beaches, allowing heavier landing craft to offload tanks and trucks, taking control of Piceno Airfield to prepare for Allied aircraft. The British 50th Division encountered British paratroopers who retreated from Ponte Grande, collaboratively moving swiftly to recapture the bridge. The initial American landings proceeded mostly as intended despite rough sea conditions. Major General Lucian Truscott's 3rd Division was the first to reach the beaches. advancing towards Licata to secure the left flank as other divisions undertook landing operations. They neutralized coastal defenses and railway artillery, clearing avenues for the incoming forces. To the east, the 45th Division secured Camiso Airfield and effectively established control over Landing Zone's right flank. The 1st Infantry Division made landfall at Gela, which included French-Moroccan troops. Although they encountered stronger resistance, they were able to seize the town by 8 a.m. By this stage, the first serious Axis counterstrikes began arriving as Guzzoni ordered the Livorno and Hermann Göring divisions to target U.S. beaches. However, due to bombardments and paratrooper activities disrupting communications, these counterattacks faced disarray. Meanwhile, in the east, Italian blackshirt militia attempted to assault the Canadians but were easily repelled. British forces advanced on Syracuse, a crucial port necessary for the sustained supply of the British landing contingents. Guzzoni hoped the strong defenses would safeguard it, yet Allied troops entered in the afternoon to a reportedly enthusiastic welcome from the local populace. Italian units mounted counterattacks on the city with seized French R-35 tanks, but by that time, British forces had strengthened their positions with anti-tank weaponry and other defensive measures. Italian tank commander Adamo Profico recounted the ill-fated assault where his tank took front. After a few hundred meters, his driver warned him about mines. The tank had already traversed the first set of mines, leading to explosions. The second tank, moving at high speed, suffered damage from enemy fire, causing it to lose control and careen off, rolling down the hill, followed by the third tank meeting a similar fate. As D-Day progressed, Allied commanders likely felt optimistic about the situation. Troops had successfully landed, beachheads were broadening, several airfields had been seized for Allied use, and Syracuse had fallen. However, complications emerged. Of the 5,300 dispatched airborne troops, only 2,000 were combat-ready the following day. Moreover, ground commanders raised concerns about the absence of air support as Allied aircraft were preoccupied with fighter and convoy missions, leaving no close air assistance available on both D-Day and the day afterward. This shortfall in air cover permitted a German Luftwaffe assault to reach Gela, destroying the ammunition ship SS Robert Rowan. Meanwhile, Axis forces were recovering their composure, having identified the beach locations and Allied units. Guzzoni issued orders for more structured counterattacks, while Battle Group Smiles attempted to restrict Allied movements toward Augusta. The Livorno and Hermann Göring divisions intensified their efforts against the Gela beachhead, launching 3 columns on July 11th to try and break through in both west and central fronts. Although Americans managed to repel the Livorno division with severe casualties, the Hermann Göring division's armored units advanced more effectively against U.S. screening forces' light anti-tank artillery. German tanks breached defensive lines and pressed towards Gela and the beachheads. Without adequate tactical air support for the American troops, initial attempts to make aerial communication and coordination suffered, eventually relying on naval spotter planes to guide naval artillery strikes to halt the assault. Axis commanders realized that the offshore naval force would devastate any further efforts to reach the beach, prompting a withdrawal to establish defensive positions around Caltagirone. Nevertheless, the setbacks suffered by the Italo-German forces did modestly slow the progress of the American 1st and 45th Divisions. The Luftwaffe, less effective in providing support, could only launch sporadic operations from the dwindling Sicilian airfields. Johannes Steinhoff, reflecting on the conditions later in his memoirs, noted the desperation of their attempts, flying ad hoc missions along the northern coast, over Etna's crater toward the Straits of Messina, where they engaged in uncoordinated assault runs against the B-17 bombers with inadequate numbers. The subsequent plan for additional paratrooper drops was scheduled for July 11th, but turned into another calamity. Given recent German air assaults, Allied anti-aircraft units were hypervigilant. When Navy and Army gunners recognized the friendly C-47s, they misidentified them as enemy aircraft and opened fire, leading to the loss of 23 out of 144 transport planes due to friendly fire, with an estimated 90 aircrew members and 229 paratrooper casualties. A report from the 82nd Airborne Division attributed the mishap to lapses in communication and lack of preparations among ground forces. In the meantime, Fleet Commander Admiral Andrew Cunningham directed blame at the pilots for straying outside predefined air corridors. While the U.S. advancement encountered hurdles, the British Eighth Army showed improved success along the coastal route, capturing Augusta on July 12th, but facing strong resistance from entrenched enemy formations. Its 3rd Division to advance towards Agrigento. As Montgomery takes increasing control of the offensive, German commanders are also taking control of the defense. General de Panzerabteilung Hans Valentin Huber of the 14th Corps takes over de facto command of the Island, while incoming German formations are preparing to reinforce him. The elite 1st Fallschirmjäger Division is on the way, assists the freshly reformed 29th Panzer Grenadier Division. On July 13th, Montgomery opens his major push towards Catania, 1st Nighttime Airborne and Seaborne. Commando raids will capture 2 bridges, the Ponte Demolition, the Ponte de Primasol. The 50th Division will then break through Axis defenses around 30 kilometers to the south, link up with the commandos, and strike out for Catania once again. The airdrops go poorly, both friendly and enemy anti-aircraft fire forces. Nearly 30% of the gliders store turn to base, and only 200 men and 3 anti-tank guns drop near their target. To make matters worse, they've dropped directly on top of the newly arrived 1st Fallschirmjäger Div. Ijan, the British do capture Primasolar Bridge but come under immediate German attack. The Brits use captured anti-tank guns and mines to repel the assaults, but casualties are mounting and ammunition is running out. Eventually they decide to relocate to a hill south the bridge and cover it from there until the 50th Division can arrive. However, the 50th Division expected to fight against Italian units, not-hardened German paratroopers, and their progressive slow fighting is particularly tough in dense vineyards and orange groves. A soldier of the 5th East Yorkshire Regiment recalls wasn't possible to see more than 20 yards in the orange groves. Some unidentified troops were moving alongside a small wall. As we were debating who they might be, the question was solved by the rapid Berhofer Spandau machine gun not very far away. On July 14th, the 50th Division reaches the bridge but finds the northern bank under solid German-controlled British troops wait across on July 15th. But German machine gunners and artillery soon pinned them down. Only a small Allied bridgehead is able. Tuba formed on July 17th. After tough fighting around the bridgehead, the Brits make another attempt towards Catania, under a heavy creeping barrage. Sergeant George Schmitz off the 1st 5 Shimi Yaga Division is on the receiving end. We survived the 1.5-hour barrage well under the cover of the tank trench with orders not to open fire until gave the order, thus without a shot being fired from our side. The attacking enemy came unhindered into the range of fire of our infantry weapons, but then he was met by our furious defensive fire. The attacker had very heavy losses, and the attack was beaten off the British attack again on July 18th, but they're unable to break through to Catania or the nearby aerodrome the next day. Montgomery abandons the plan and shifts the focus to his planned swing around Mount Etna, but what was envisioned as a speedy thrust is also an arduous slog. On July 17th. The Canadians push along Highway 124, but are stopped short of by tenacious resistance. Axis forces have already shifted their positions to counter the move. Hube decides to abandon the west of Sicily. ND fall back to a series of defensive lines around Edna. His plan is now to defend Sicily as long as possible before withdrawing forces across the Messina Straits into Italy. However, the withdrawal is not our retreat. German and Italian rearguard units continue to contest town after town demolitions and booby traps. Further slowly, Allied events with Montgomery bogged down Patton's senses and opportunity. He demands that U.S. forces be given a more significant objective, arguing there's a political necessity for the American public to see their troops at work. Alex Ander concedes and allows Patton to capture Palermo, a major port in the largest city on the island. U.S. forces, especially the 2nd Armored Division, now race forward against isolated pockets of mostly Italian troops who often surrender after token resistance. Colonel James Gavin of the 82nd Airborne recalls, it was unlike anything else I'd encountered during the wars. Suddenly a machine gun or anti-tank weapon would open up, and then the white flags would appear. A shot had been fired for honor, but it was just as likely to cause casualties as a shot fired in anger. The U. Troops have another advantage in their drive across Sicily. Large numbers of American troops are Italian Americans, some with Sicilian heritage. They occasionally receive a warm reception from locals and can use their connections to gain important intelligence. This intelligence also makes use of criminal connections among New York mafia families with ties to Sicily. Local Sicilian mafia opposed to Mussolini helps gather intelligence and guide Allied troops through the mountain passes. Meanwhile, German troops report a hostile attitude toward their continued presence. German paratrooper Joseph Klein recalls their response to his unit's demolitions works. Civilians submerged, a spokesman waving LD hunting rifles around and assuming a threatening posture like kerfuffle did not end until our platoon sergeant, the damn machine gun group, with an MG-42 set up on the market square on at least one occasion. Tensions spill over into murder. The Hammond-Girdling Division shoots 16 Italian men in Castellone de Sicilia, likely as retaliation for supposed thefts by July 22nd. The Americans have taken Palermo, and the Allies have practically cut the Island in two at Termini Miris U. Stroop stake 5,000 Italian prisoners with only 272 casualties. Patton now directs his troops along northern Sicily to participate in the attack towards Messina. Indeed, for him, it has now become a race about whether the Americans or the British will get to Messina first. Meanwhile, in Rome, the war takes an unexpected and dramatic turn. Italian dictator Benito Mussolini is voted out of the fascist Grand Council and arrested. His time as El Duce is now over. King Emmanuel assumes full constitutional powers. Mussolini had faced a growing conspiracy from within his own general staff and the Sicily. An invasion paired with the Allied bombing of mainland Italy act as the final nail in the coffin. But with Hitler watching closely, Italy vows to continue the war for the time being. Mussolini's removal also ends any pretense of Italian command in Sicily. General Hubin now oversees the entire withdrawal and evacuation. His troops continue to fight reactions towards the Etna line based around the formidable Century position. Meanwhile, troops advance towards Torino, another prepared defensive point. Carefully positioned German anti-tank guns Mack Hinnigan tanks stake their tall, in many cases small groups of Axis troops delay entire Allied divisions in the narrow mountain roads. Progress is also hampered by a lack of close air support coordination by the Allies. The process of requesting airstrikes is slow and convoluted, and in any case fragile radio equipment breaks down or cannot get through the mountainous terrain. Confused boundaries between British units add to the problem as the British 30 Corps assault Centuripa fighter bombers of the U.S. 12th Air Support Command attack. Ked Themby mistake 30 Corps Commander Lieutenant General Oliver Lease phones General Omar Bradley to complain, "What have we done that your chaps would want to bomb us? They've hit right on top of my headquarters. They have really plastered the town." Exhausted and inexperienced Allied units are now at a breaking point. Major Derrick, the stack pool of the 7th Royal Marines, an entirely green formation, recalls an attack on Tatanomi God. "When I think of the things that went wrong, the unpreparedness, and the Russian hurry of the whole blasted amateurish me. So poor old 7th RM never have so many been buggered about by sof only their lease of experienced units from North Africa breaks the deadlock aided by the arrival of the British 78th Battle Axe Division." The British and Canadians captured Century in its dominating heights on August 1st. On August 6th, the U.S. 1st Division finally captures Torino, but only after the Axis counterattacked no less than 24 times, with these two positions lost. Dubin knows that the battle is now over. He speeds up preparations for evacuation, but continues his punishing rearguard actions. The British 3rd Division, advancing along the coast, is especially held up at Montefeltro to assist at Patton orders amphibious landings behind enemy lines on August 8th, 11th, and 16th. Although risky, the so-called Endruns does the advance. The British also conduct their own landing on August 16th to cut off retreating elements of the Hermanduring Division, but are unable to catch them. Both Allied forces now converge on Messina, and during the night of August 16th, the vanguard of the 3rd Division enters the outskirts. Hub has well-organized evacuation comes to an end. The narrow straits, coastal guns, and large anti-aircraft forces means the Allied forces mostly don't disrupt the evacuation, and on August 17th, Hub is command son of the last units to leave Sicily. Of the eventual 460,000 Allied troops in Sicily, around 5,000 are killed, and up to 16,000 wounded in Operation Husky. An additional 3,500 are missing. Of those killed, 1,400 are paratroopers. German losses are 4,500 killed, 13,500 wounded, and around 1,000 missing or captured. Italian losses are especially high, 4,650 Italian troops are killed, 5,000 wounded, and up to 2,000 missing or captured. The loss of Sicily also decimates Axis air units. In July 1943 alone, 711 German aircraft were lost in the Mediterranean. The Ader and the Italian Regia Aeronautica is in the process of dissolution after Husky high cost for the limit damage that they were able to inflate. But despite these results, the rare Allied complaints with the first major joint operation, there was poor coordination, especially between different branches, as well as animosity and a lack of communication between commanders. Although tactical air superiority improved as the invasion went and Army commanders consistently claimed that they rarely saw friendly air cover, air commanders replied that they were attacking targets further to their more important contribution. Better communication regarding objectives and methods may have smoothed over these tensions. Alexander is also accused of giving Montgomery too much control and undervaluing Stroop's potential, while Patton to his critic, EZ by both superiors and subordinates. General Omar Bradley, who served under Patton, accuses him of recklessness with the lives of his men, especially in his race to beat Montgomery to Messina. A race some historians suggest Montgomery was not even aware of. News also emerges of two incidents in which Patton slapped enlisted men and at Piscata on July 14th. Stroop's massacre 73 Axis prisoners. The perpetrators claim Patton ordered for no prisoners to be taken, something Patton denied. They were also missed Allied opportunities. Ashuba's faith. A said withdrawal preserved his fighting strength. In the first 17 days of August, the Axis evacuate 1,000 troops, 10,000 vehicles, 200 artillery guns, and 47 tanks to Italy, where they would continue the struggle. However, the Allies also learned lessons from their mistakes. For example, almost all aircraft will display clear invasion stripes to prevent friendly fire during the Normandy invasions, while airborne operations will enjoy longer planning periods and wider use of Pathfinder units to guide in the PAR. Troopers, they also make tactical improvements, including improved rugged radios and clearer channels for requesting air support. Arguably thought the biggest outcome of Husky is also a mostly unintended one. Their removal of Mussolini opens the question of Italy's role in the war. But while the Allied demand of unconditional surrender remains, Italy seems reluctant to surrender, and the battle for Italy will continue. In fact, many of the units on both sides who'd fought in Sicily will soon meet again on new battlefields. Naval landings with airborne support were a staple of Allied strategy in Western Europe until the end of the Second World War, and the biggest single-day airborne drop happened already on German soil in 1945, when the 21st Army Group under Bernard Montgomery had to cross the Rhine, north of the rural region, in the last set-piece battle on the Western Front. The Allies fought their way from the Dutch border to the last natural barrier before the heartland of the Rhine River. If I want to learn more about this often overlooked campaign, you can watch Rhine Line 45, our 5-part, 3.5-hour documentary series about the battle for the Rhine, filmed on the former battlefields using detailed maps and animations, together with expert guests like Christoph Bergs or David Willey from the Tank Museum, and featuring a veteran interview. Rhineland 45 is the most detailed documentary about the Rhineland campaign, because we show the war as it really happened. Any of this series is not available on YouTube because it would get immediately demonetized, so where can you watch Rhineland 45? On Nebula streaming service WebBuild together with other creators on WWII. We don't have to worry about the algorithm or advertiser guidelines, and the viewers there support us directly simply by watching our videos, which, by the way, are ad-free and usually uploaded earlier than on YouTube. If you head over to nebula.tv real-time history and sign up, you can save $40 on an annual subscription right now, and watch Ryan 945 or our brand new Nebula original series, Red Atoms, about the Soviet nuclear program. That's not all apart from a growing number of Nebula originals. Your subscription now also includes classes where you can learn all kinds of different skills from Nebula creators directly. That's Nebula.